Have you ever been weary? You're probably thinking, well, that's a dumb question. Well, recently, my life took an unexpected turn. I was put in a role that I wasn't expecting to be in. And as a result, I had responsibilities that I didn't have previously. But those responsibilities were placed on top of the responsibilities that I already had. And it was a tough transition. And it's tempting during those times to just keep pushing, just to persevere. Now, don't get me wrong, perseverance is a good character trait. It's encouraged of the Lord. But sometimes the answer is not perseverance, pressing on. Sometimes the answer is a pause. And that's what I want to talk to you about. I'm learning the power of a pause. Now, being weary doesn't have anything to do with age. I'm not as young as I used to be, but Isaiah says even the youths get tired and weary, and young men utterly fall. No, being weary is common to all of us. And interestingly, even Jesus grew weary. In John chapter 4, we read that Jesus must needs go through Samaria. And he came to this place called Sychar. It was where Jacob's well was. And John tells us something interesting. He says Jesus was weary from his journey. And then John tells us what he did. He sat down at the well. Now, John also tells us that it's where Jesus had the encounter with the woman at the well. And when the disciples came back, they brought food. And they tried to encourage Jesus to eat. And Jesus said to them, "My meat is to do the will of him that sent me and to finish his work." Now, this tells us that sometimes, in order to finish the work the Lord has for us, we've got to stop. We've got to do like Jesus did and sit down. The power of the pause. Now, there's something else interesting here, because I tend to think weariness is tantamount to weakness. Now, there's no doubt that I have weaknesses, but no one would dare say that Jesus did. So weariness is not weakness. And so if Jesus needed to assume the sitting position, there's going to be times that you and I need to do the same thing. And another thing that's interesting is part of that work the Father had for him involved sitting at that well. It was the pause that brought the power, because it was the pause that allowed him to have an encounter with that woman. There were people in Sychar who needed the Lord. And it was that sitting that accomplished the work. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God. Now, the second part of that verse says, I will be exalted among the heathen. I will be exalted in the earth. By being still, God says he will be exalted. And it's so true, because Jesus sat there on the well and he was exalted, the Father, among the heathen, because the people of Sychar came to Christ, believed upon him. And it all started when Jesus sat down. Power was found in the pause. If you and I are going to finish the work the Lord has for us, yeah, there's going to be times in our life that we have to press and persevere and work. But that's going to have to be balanced with learning to sit, to just be still, know that he's God, and allow his power to work in our lives. After a long day of teaching, Jesus said to his disciples as they were getting into a boat, let us pass over to the other side. As they were going, Luke's gospel tells us, Jesus fell asleep. And Mark gives us an interesting tidbit of information, if you will. He says, Jesus was asleep on a pillow. The power of the pause is seen in Jesus' life in the sitting position, but it's also seen with a soft pillow. Once again, we're not told specifically that Jesus was weary, but obviously he was tired. Luke says he fell asleep. He gathered up a pillow, if you will, and took him a power nap. It was during this time that a storm came up. The disciples were panicking, and they said, Lord, as they were waking him, don't you care that we perish? And it was during this situation, during this power nap, that we hear those famous words of Jesus as he steps to the bow of the boat and he says, peace, be still. Peace, be still. Jesus was there in perfect peace in the middle of a storm. He was still. He had power during the storm. In Psalm 127, verse 2, we're told, he giveth his beloved sleep. Now, I know a lot of people who think sleep is a waste of time. I also know a lot of people who struggle with sleep. Well, be encouraged, because he giveth his beloved sleep. In Psalm 4, David says, I will both lay me down in peace and sleep. For you, Lord, only make me dwell in safety. The psalm before that, Psalm 3, David says, I laid me down and slept, and the Lord awakened me. He sustained me. Sleep is a gift from the Lord, and it's part of the power of the pause. In Psalm 23, he maketh me lie down in green pastures. In 1 Kings chapter 19, we have that great story of Elijah running from Jezebel. She had threatened to take his life. He had been given 24 hours. And so he fled into the wilderness, and we're told that he sat down underneath a juniper tree. But in Elijah's case, a sitting position was not enough. He was at his wit's end. He was ready to die, even told the Lord so. And the scripture tells us he fell asleep underneath that tree. And while he slept, the angel prepared him food and water and woke him up and said, "Elijah, arise and eat." And so he did. He woke up and he ate and he drank and he laid back down and went to sleep. Well, the angel did it again and woke him up, and he arose and ate and drank. And the angel said, "You need to do this because the journey before you is great." You know, I know we love the super spiritual stuff. We get excited about those type of things, but sometimes it's the simple things, it's the little things like a good old power nap that allows us to continue on in the journey. And it was after that power nap that Elijah was ready to hear the still small voice of the Lord. I'm reminded of another man named Daniel, Daniel chapter 6. The people that were against him, the other rulers who were jealous and envious of him, went to Darius and coerced him into passing a ruling that if anyone for 30 days called upon any god or anyone other than the king, well, they'd be in trouble. Well, Daniel did as he always did, knelt down 3 times a day and he sought the Lord, and they snitched, they told on him. The king liked Daniel and tried to find a way out, but the law of the Medes and the Persians didn't allow anything that the king had commanded to change, and so he was thrown in the lion's den. And the scripture tells us that the king could not sleep. He stayed up all night, worried about Daniel and what his destiny would be there in that den with the hungry lions. Now, we're not told that Daniel slept, but I like to think that he did. The king is up pacing the floor. Daniel is there in the den. Early in the morning, the king rose up and he says, "Daniel, was your God able to save you?" And Daniel says, "God sent his angel and shut the mouths of the lions." I love that. Now, one more example. In Acts chapter 12, Herod set out to vex the church. He killed James and thought that that was giving him some popularity. So he took Peter and he placed Peter in prison. The holiday was approaching, and so he wanted to wait until after that to do the same. That was Peter's fate, according to Herod. And Luke tells us that the night before his execution, Peter goes to sleep. He takes a power nap. You know, the scripture tells us that he that keepeth Israel neither sleepeth nor slumbereth. So I guess Peter had the mentality that if the Lord was going to stay awake, there wasn't any reason for both of them to do so. So Peter went to sleep, and in the middle of the night, the angel of the Lord came, and Peter was so asleep that the angel had to smite him in his side to get him to wake up. He said, "Arise, Peter. Get dressed. It's time to go." God opened the prison doors. Peter was asleep there between 2 soldiers. He was chained by both of them. And the Lord set him free. Peter found power in the midst of the pause. He's not pacing the floors. He's counting sheep. We need to learn the power of the pause. We need to learn the sitting position. We need to learn that sometimes we just need to grab a soft pillow. Take us a power nap. Jesus had sent his disciples out 2 and 2 to preach the gospel, heal the sick. He'd given them power for ministry. And when they returned to tell him all that they had done, Jesus says this, "Come ye yourselves apart into a desert place and rest a while." They had been working, they had been ministering. And no doubt, there was much more work to be done. But according to Jesus, it was now time to rest. And he told them to go into a solitary place, a desert place, to get away from it all. Mark tells us in chapter 6 that they had no time for leisure, not even time to eat. It was a busy time. And Jesus knew they needed rest. And sometimes the only place you can find rest is in a solitary place. Getting away from it all and getting away from everyone else. Now in chapter 1, Mark tells us that this was Jesus' practice. This is what he did on a regular basis. Mark tells us that Jesus rose up in the morning a great while before day, and he departed into a solitary place so he could be alone with the Father and pray, no doubt to be recharged for what lay ahead. In John chapter 6, after Jesus sent the disciples away and the crowd away, John tells us Jesus went up into the mountain alone so he could pray. There's something about solitude, and it's part of the power of the pause. Yes, we need the sitting position. Sometimes we need a soft pillow. But other times, we simply need to get away into a solitary place where no one else is, where there's no distractions, no noise, no people. And just pray and seek the Lord for power to continue on. Right now, I'm in a solitary place. No one's around. Taking advantage of the pause. Jesus was so accustomed to doing this that John tells us in chapter 18, Judas knew that Jesus spent time in the garden, and that's where he would find him when it was time to betray him. Isaiah says in chapter 30, verse 15, "In returning and rest ye shall be saved. In quietness and confidence shall be your strength." Unfortunately, Isaiah says to Israel, you would not. They wouldn't do it. And unfortunately today, there are many people who won't as well. They just keep pressing, keep plowing ahead, never taking time to discover the power of the pause. It's so important that we learn this. I'm learning this. I encourage you to learn this as well. In Isaiah 40, Isaiah says, "Hast thou not known? Hast thou not heard that the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth, he fainteth not, neither is weary." He says, there's no searching of his understanding. He says he giveth power to the faint, and to those who have no might, he increaseth strength. Then he says, as I mentioned earlier, even the youth shall be weary and faint, and young men shall utterly fall. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up on wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. That's the power of the pause. The writer of Hebrews says, "Consider him that endured such contradiction of sinners against himself, lest you be wearied and faint in your minds." That's what I've been trying to do out here today. That's what I've been trying to encourage you to do, to consider him, to consider Jesus. In chapter 12 of Hebrews, we're told, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. He's going to finish it for us. He's going to bring us across the finish line. He's promised to do that. He that hath begun a good work in you shall perform it unto the day of Jesus Christ. He's going to finish it. But in the process, we're going to have to learn the power of the pause. We're going to have to look to Jesus and see him in that sitting position there on the well. We're going to have to look to Jesus and see him with that sleeping pillow there in the boat. We're going to have to look to Jesus and see him in that solitary place all alone with the Father. Jesus said, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." He said, learn of me. Learn of me as I sit at the well. Learn of me as I sleep in the boat. Learn of me as I go off into a solitary place to spend time with the Father. Learn of me. Learn the power of the pause. I hope this video helped you. More importantly, I hope you will learn from Jesus. Learn to sit like he did. Learn to sleep like he did. And learn to find a solitary place like he did. Learn the power of the pause.